Mason Taylor, I think, has the highest ceiling of any player from LSU in this draft class. He checks every box for the modern tight end. And one of the really fascinating things about Taylor.
The Jets just drafted Mason Taylor out of LSU. He's the son of Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. But here's what's wild. Unlike his father, who dominated at defensive end, Mason is actually a tight end who could transform the Jets offense. Today, I'm joined by Matt Moscona of ESPN Radio out of Baton Rouge. He's been covering Mason his entire college career, and he's got a lot to say about him. Let's get into it. Matt Moscona of ESPN Radio out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Pat, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
So, a lot of people here in New York may not know who you are, so please give us a little bit of background on who you are, how you started, and how you ended up in Louisiana covering sports down there.
Yeah, man. The quick bio. Born in New Orleans, spent most of my life in Baton Rouge, LSU alum, did a brief hiatus in South Bend, Indiana, a little time in Minnesota as well, but pretty lucky, man. Like you, kind of get to sit on my butt and talk about sports and teams that I care about, which is pretty cool. So I've hosted Afternoon Drive on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge for the last 15 years and syndicated all throughout the state, and been very fortunate to be able to do what I do for a long time, man. So I love it.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. I want to talk about Mason Taylor. This kid seems like a stud to me. And I know a lot of Jeff fans out there are kind of a little bit sour on the pick because Tyler Warren was there in the first round. But looking at his play and honestly his pedigree, which we'll get into, I think it's a fantastic pick. So give me your overall thought on him.
Okay, so Pat, your Jets fans are going to like what I have to say. For some context, I'm not the sunshine pumper local market guy that's going to tell you every player that ever came out is going to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not going to tell you that Mason Taylor is going to be in the Hall of Fame. But I think Mason Taylor, look, everybody knows Will Campbell from LSU was the 4th overall pick, and he's going to be awesome. Mason Taylor, I think, has the highest ceiling of any player from LSU in this draft class. He checks every box for the modern tight end. And one of the really fascinating things about Taylor is when he showed up at LSU, he's about 230 pounds. He was a 3-star, so he was a lowly regarded guy, wasn't a giant recruit. Brian Kelly has had a tendency throughout his career, from Notre Dame, even prior to now, of pumping 2 positions into the NFL more than any other. It's offensive line and tight end. And he knew what he was looking at in Mason Taylor. And by the time Taylor left here, he was 6'5", 250. He is a very solid inline blocker, and he is a fluid athlete who gets open, and he was Garrett Nussmeier's security blanket. When they had a 3rd and 7, needed 8 yards, they went to Mason. As a true freshman, when they're playing Alabama and they're in overtime, they needed the 2-point conversion, they went to Mason, front right corner of the end zone. He has, you mentioned the pedigree with his dad, being a Pro Football Hall of Famer. You will never have a problem with him in the locker room. Already understands a pro lifestyle. Man, anybody who is sour on that pick is just missing the mark, because he is going to, provided he stays healthy, and that's always a big variable, he is going to be a high-level pro for a long time.
How has he, now you said he was a 3-star recruit coming in, so how has he grown from his freshman year to now his junior year, coming out a little early? How has his game improved?
The blocking is what's improved. Because Brian Kelly wants his tight ends to be that sort of hybrid mix. You're not going to have just the extra offensive lineman, the 270-pound guy, but you're also not going to have the more slender pass-catching only tight ends. And what Mason had to work on when he showed up on campus was putting his hand in the dirt and moving bodies. Now, adding 25 pounds since his freshman year, growing into his body, filling out his frame, has done that. They also recruited in that same class, or the next year, a kid from JUCO who effectively was a glorified offensive tackle, right? With a tight end jersey. They actually would do that sometimes too, Pat. They would take an offensive lineman, put a tight end jersey. You see it in the NFL all the time. You're the tackle eligible, but in college you actually have to put on a different jersey number. And so they would do that at times. But by the time you made it through this year, Mason became that guy that was physical enough at the point of attack to move blockers and to move bodies as a blocker. So that was the biggest thing. He came in as a fluid athlete with great hands that could catch the ball. He had to develop as a blocker, and he did it throughout his time.
Would you say he's better as a pass protection blocker or more of a road grader? Because this offense with the Jets, with Justin Fields, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, they're going to be running the ball, I think, a ton with that read option kind of offense. So, and we have a pretty decent blocking tight end in Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State, but he is not a very good catching tight end. So, as far as his run blocking ability goes, how would you rate him?
Yeah, they didn't ask him to pass protect a lot. When Mason was in the game, what they had to prevent was becoming predictable by personnel, right? So if Mason was in the game, they had to show they were going to run the ball. And so they did, and they would run behind him. But it was very seldom, if ever, that he was staying in pass protection on passing downs. So to answer your question, he became a plus blocker. So let me say it to you this way. I don't want to suggest that he's Will Campbell, right? But what I am saying is he wasn't a liability in the run game as a blocker, and it was something that he worked very intentionally on to get bigger and more physical. And LSU's tight ends coach also has a background coaching offensive linemen as well. So a guy that's very intently focused on making sure that they worked on run blocking and block fits. But when Mason first showed up, the first tight end coach he had was Mike Denbrock, who was the offensive coordinator as well. And Mike also has a background coaching tight ends as well as being a play caller. So he's been coached well, and the physical development is the biggest change he's made. But to answer your question, long way of answering it, yes, I don't know that we watched him pass protect much. He was more utilized in the running game as a blocker.
So I'm looking at his stats right now. 1,300 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. I believe I saw a graphic where he's considered or is the most productive tight end in LSU history. Is that correct? It's
not even close. Yes.
So he came in with these kind of skills as a pass catcher, as a scorer?
Absolutely. And he only had 6 touchdowns in his career. In large part, though, Pat, that's because they didn't really utilize him in the red zone. Now, the exception is the most famous play that he had, which was the 2-point conversion against Alabama. But for some context, remember, he came in on a team that had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and the late Kyron Lacey, who sadly passed a few weeks ago, but would have been a pro as well. And he came into a team with a very solid running game as well. So he wasn't featured in the red zone. Even this past year, LSU had a guy named Trey'Dez Green who was a 5-star. He is your pass catching tight end. He's 6'7", 230 pounds, who became a real mismatch in the red zone, and so they utilized it. So Mason's touchdown numbers in college weren't great, largely because if you got Malik Neighbors on the team, you're probably going to throw him the ball.
Yeah.
So that's why his touchdown numbers weren't what they were. But yes, when he showed up on campus, that was the thing that he immediately assimilated into, was as the pass catching tight end. And look, he came in when Brian Kelly, after that, recruited a class with 4 tight ends in it, and none of those guys, actually none of them are even on campus anymore. They've all transferred out because Mason just put a stranglehold on that from his freshman year on.
So how much of his football pedigree has helped him in his career so far? Obviously, the biggest influence is his dad, Jason Taylor. We see the Jets Instagram page and Twitter page throwing up pictures of him from the 2010 season in the stands at MetLife.
How cool is that? Yeah.
And his nephew by marriage, Zach Thomas.
Yeah.
So what have they instilled in him, and how does that translate to him either on the field or in the locker room?
Yeah, it's interesting, Pat. So we didn't, during Mason's 3 years in Baton Rouge, we didn't see Jason a lot. And that's in large part because he's coaching, right? I mean, he's coaching in Miami, and so he doesn't have Saturdays off. His mom, Katina, was around. She was at every game, so she was very present. But I think, look, man, you cover college athletics for long enough. I would say one of the biggest questions that you have for a guy transitioning from college to the NFL is how will they handle stardom and money? Like, will money change you? Will it change your work ethic? Will it change your approach? And you see that happen with a lot of guys, man. I think with Mason, he's already emotionally matured to a level that you don't often see with guys. But it makes sense, right? I mean, when you grow up in NFL locker rooms and your dad's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, being on the field in a venue with 100,000 people doesn't move you the way it might a 17-year-old from a small town in Louisiana that's never experienced that.
Right.
So the on-field stuff is easy to explain, Pat. Like, yeah, I mean, his dad's a Hall of Famer. He can teach him a lot about hand placement and how to train and all those things, which is a massive advantage. But I think it's probably more the mental aspect of it and just the emotional maturity that Mason brought to LSU and that I think he'll take to the NFL. I'm trying to think in 3 years if there was ever, like literally ever, a negative story with Mason. And there's not one that I can recall. Just a good young guy, man, from a good family who is grounded in himself and worked really hard and gave himself an awesome opportunity that he's got here with the Jets. And I'll tell you, man, I know you mentioned as we opened too, the Tyler Warren was on the board, and I know Colston Loveland went high. In any other draft, man, without those two guys, Mason Taylor is a no doubt first rounder, man. I mean, he's probably the best. Like, had he come back to school, he probably would have been the best tight end in next year's draft.
Really?
So I look at the Jets getting him at 42, and that feels like highway robbery to me. Like, you knocked someone down on the sidewalk and stole their wallet right out of their back pocket. I mean, it's anyone who's upset about that pick, man, you won't be for long. You're going to love him.
So do you think he's going to be an impact player right away?
Now, I don't know everything about the Jets roster, so that's where I'd have to lean on you. And I know
they're thin at tight end. I'll tell you right now. The only other guy there really is Ruckert. They got this guy Stone Smart, I think, from the Chargers, but that's it. Tyler Conklin's gone. They need a pass-catching tight end. That's what they need. They need another weapon, is what they need.
They got a pass-catching tight end for Justin Fields to throw the ball to.
Exactly. They need a safety valve.
Man, I would be so, like, look, I love the NFL too, man. I cover the Saints a ton, so I don't see the Jets a lot. But so I can't tell everything about the Jets and their roster and everything they're in. But I have seen here this dichotomy with someone like Juwan Johnson with the Saints, who's a former receiver who they transitioned to tight end. And then they usually also have the second tight end that's just the hand in the dirt blocker. Foster Moreau's that guy right now. But what you want is the guy that's the in-between. What you want is the Kelsey, the Kittle. Like, you want that guy who could be a physical dude in the run game, but can be a problem in a mismatch when you're asking a nickel or a linebacker to try to cover him over the middle.
Yeah.
And Mason is more that than he is the just the straight pass catcher who's going to be a liability in the other parts of the game. And the other thing too, man, as a guy that's only 3 years removed from high school, he's 21 years old. I don't think he's done getting physically bigger and stronger as well.
Yeah.
You get him into an NFL weight program, and maybe you put another 10 or 15 pounds on him to where he can still maintain his athleticism, and he becomes an even greater asset for you in that aspect. It's just a really high ceiling pick, man. Very high ceiling pick, and a guy that you're never going to worry about him as a pro.
Last question. What would you say is the defining moment of his career at LSU?
That's easy. He made it as a freshman, and you hate to say it that, like, you
mentioned it before
as a freshman, but man, listen, Nick Saban. I don't know if you all saw this clip in the draft, if Jets fans have seen it, but so Nick Saban on the ABC coverage of the draft said that Mason Taylor was the biggest recruiting miss in his coaching career. I'm not sure if you saw that or if you heard that.
Yes, I did.
So listen, Pat, that's probably a little bit of hyperbole. I mean, Nick Saban was a head coach for 35 years. I mean, he won 7 championships, and I'm sure there was a lot of recruiting misses, but it does underscore the impact. And he highlighted that play. Listen, as a true freshman, with LSU Alabama is the biggest game of the year. If that's Jets Pats, whatever game y'all want to win, call it a playoff game against your bitter rival, whatever you want to say. It's the biggest game of the year. And LSU is in overtime. Jaden Daniels, on the first play of overtime, they ran a rollout to the right, play designed for Mason Taylor, front right pylon, caught it, turned up, got inside the pylon, 2-point conversion, fans rushed the field. The point is, man, don't lose. That was a true freshman playing his 9th collegiate game in overtime against your bitter rival, and they called his number on a team where you had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and dudes on that team, and they went to Mason Taylor in that spot. It speaks volumes about their trust in him, his ability in that spot, and that is, look, that's not only the defining moment of his career, that's one of the greatest moments in the history of the program. So that's an easy one, man. That's one you'll see on highlight reels for as long as they play football at LSU.
Matt, this was awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks for giving me your time. I think you give our fans a really good picture of Mason Taylor, because, you know, you can watch all the highlights, but you don't really get a sense of who the guy is unless you're talking to someone like yourself who's covered him for the last 3 years and kind of understands what he's like, not only on the field, but in the locker room. So I really appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Hey, man, Pat, I would say if you could spell my name, you can find me on the internet. It's Moscona, but our shows stream live at 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge on YouTube or podcast or wherever. But, man, if you look me up on Twitter or X or anything, you'll find links to everything I do, man. I'm hard to miss if you can spell my name.
Awesome. All right, guys, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe the video. We got a lot more coming up. And until next time, go Jets.